Hello, I'm Tracy Nicholas, and welcome to Folkloring. I am a passionate folklore practitioner, and to me, folkloring is more than just a podcast. It's my commitment to help you connect with your roots and awaken the wisdom within you.
Hello. Before I start this episode, I wanted to jump on quick and share some exciting news with you. My book, Mind Over Magic, is now available for purchase. In it, I talk about our ideas about magic, and I get into some of the science behind what we thought was magic just a couple of decades ago. You can buy the book at folkloringlife.com, and if you would like a personalized dedication, just send me a message and I will make sure that happens. You can also get it in bookstores or on Amazon. If you do get it, it would really help me out if you could leave a review on Amazon. It helps me with visibility, which really helps with sales, and I would truly appreciate it. I would also love to hear any thoughts that you have on the book. If you'd like to continue the conversation about folklore and magic, find me at my school community, Folkloring Life. You can find links for the book, for my community, and a bunch of other stuff on my website, folkloringlife.com. Now, on to the episode. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Folkloring. Today I'm here with Helen Lundstrom Irwin, and Helen is the author of The Lure of Water and Wood, plus some other books that we're going to talk about, and the creator of the virtual space, the Foremother's Café, and founder of the Virtual Reality Historical Initiative, which is an initiative that is inspired by history and virtual reality. So, before we get into all that, though, hi, Helen. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, before we start with the interview, have you been folkloring lately? And if so, how?
Yeah, I folklore every Christmas, or jul, like we say in Sweden. And I have an American nephew, my husband's nephew, and his kids. He has a girl and two boys. And every year we put out a bowl of oatmeal for the house gnome. And that is a Swedish tradition. And it's very important to give a bowl of porridge, usually oatmeal is what we do for this little guy. He's not taller than a hand, and he watches your house and your animals during the year, and he loves doing that. He's very happy and does that with joy, but he does want to get paid once a year on Yule Eve or Christmas Eve, and he wants a bowl of oatmeal or any porridge that you have in your house with a lot of butter and sugar. And as long as you do that, everything's fine and he's grateful. But if you should forget, he causes mischief. So don't forget it, because then you might find that a window is left open, or that your shoes are missing, or you're missing your keys, or one of your shoes are missing, because he causes mischief. He gets upset. He wants to get paid. And it's sweet because the my grandnephews and grandniece, they have really taken to this, and they're American. And I'll tell you more. I grew up in Sweden, but I they've really taken to this, and they've kind of made their own lore about it, because traditionally you put this bowl of porridge outside, and but they put it on the mantelpiece. And then they have little gnomes that I have given them, little Christmas decorations of Swedish gnomes. So they put them next to the gnomes, and then the next morning, somehow, those gnomes have eaten some of the porridge. So they run and they check and before they open their presents. And it's sweet because it's right above the mantelpiece where they have their stockings. So we have like an American and a Swedish tradition that we share in our family. So that's how I folklore.
Yeah, and it's funny because your house gnome likes the oatmeal exactly the same way I do, with plenty of
Oh,
butter, plenty of sugar.
oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice.
brown sugar, right?
Yeah, brown sugar is good. They do have brown sugar in their house. That is very delicious.
So for me, what I've been doing lately is I set up a permanent ancestor altar in my house. And I've got pictures of, people that I know of that have passed. And I was told not too long ago that in a ritual that I was in, that an ancestor came through and described very specifically this person and said, "Oh, and the your ancestor would like to have an offering of whiskey." And I was like, "Okay." So I put out a little cup of whiskey and left it out there. And it's kind of funny because I put it on the altar, which is on a little shelf that is above
Mhm.
my couch. It's like right there. And I was working last night and I texted some of my friends and I'm like, you guys, I'm sitting here working and all I can smell is this whiskey. And so they're like, you should just move it. So that's what I've been doing lately.
Well, I love that. And I
Oh,
like
thank you.
whiskey. That's
Yeah,
nice.
I like whiskey too. This was some cheaper whiskey that I bought for offerings. So, and I'll go pour it outside later.
Ah.
Yeah, because that, like, typically any offering that I make, I'll put
Hmm.
outside afterwards. And, the animals will come and get it. Not the whiskey, obviously, but if
Hmm.
it's, something edible, they'll come and get it. And I feel like, as opposed to throwing it away, it seems
Yeah.
disrespectful to throw it away. So,
Yeah. And then it becomes an offering that goes back to nature also.
exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And so I always try and make offerings that are healthy things that will not harm them, so I don't do
Hmm.
stuff with a lot of preservatives. I'll bake some shortbread or something like that. So that's what I do.
I love that. That's really nice.
Okay, let's get into it. I gave you a little bit of an introduction, but can you tell listeners about yourself and your path of how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I grew up in Sweden, like I mentioned before, in a town called Helsingborg. And my parents had a cottage in the countryside, in the middle of the woods. And I spent a lot of time there as a child with them. And I was allowed to roam in the woods by myself. And I really want to thank my parents for letting me do that because I really think that the fact that they let me roam alone and be by myself and just be in my own head with my own imagination has really helped with my creativity. And I really think that's because I'm a writer today, because I had that time to myself to
Sure.
use my imagination. And I still have a very vivid imagination. So it hasn't left me. And I moved to New York in the early 90s when I was in my 20s. And I write history. I write about Swedish history and do Swedish cultural work as a way to connect with my culture and my heritage, because it's still very much part of me, even though I've lived in the United States for over 30 years now. It's very much part of me. And like I was saying, I teach my grandnephews and grandniece a little bit about our history and culture, and it's very meaningful to me. And yeah, so that's a little bit about myself.
So, and I love that you equate nature with creativity. We didn't have any, like forest around here. There was little tiny woods area in the park. But what we have around here are ravines.
Mm.
So, obviously you can build next to a ravine, but not, and so there's very wild still. And I spent my childhood running around in the ravines and it's such good memories of being in nature. So I completely get that.
No.
And, mostly when people are talking about why they became a writer or, where their creativity comes from, they talk about, oh, I loved to read, or I was really interested in folklore, or, things like that. And so the fact that it is nature-based for you primarily is fantastic
Oh,
in my
thank you.
opinion. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's talk about the lure of water and wood. Is this your most recent book?
Yes, it is. It was published in 223.
Okay.
Yeah, 2023.
Yeah. And this is a fiction novel.
It's a historical fantasy.
Okay.
So it's based on history, but there's a fantasy element to it. And because I write the characters I'm writing about, they are the ones who are telling the story. And there are two mythological characters, and they tell the story. So that's why it falls under the historical fantasy genre.
Hmm. So can you talk about those two characters and what they're like and what your inspiration was with them?
Sure, sure. So there are two Swedish mythological creatures from our folklore, and one of them is a male water creature who's known for drowning people in the river,
Ooh.
especially women. And he's also known as a very, very talented violinist. And especially later in the centuries, he was known to sit in the river and play violin. And his music was so beautiful that women heard it and they just couldn't resist. So they followed him after they followed him into the river and then he drowned them. And then there's a female character who's called Reo. Oh, I should say the male character is called Näcken, and the female character is a forest character, kind of like a forest sprite, if you will. And her name is Reo. And the word Reo means care, which is interesting because she cares for the forest and she lives in the forest and she's known to lure men into the woods with her. And she's described in several ways. One of them is that she's a beautiful woman with very, very long brown hair down to her knees. And when men are out in the woods alone, often woodcutters or somebody who's been out in the woods or walking home from a mine, they might see her in the woods. And they can't really tell if she's a woman or maybe just one of the tree trunks. And so they follow her in. And sometimes when they get close to her, they see that she's just a tree trunk. There was no woman at all. Other times, the lore describes that they do see her, they follow her, and she moves her hair away from her back, and then her back is a tree trunk. Sometimes there's a hole in the tree trunk. But what happens is that men get sucked into her, sometimes through that hole, sometimes just by her presence. And then she has a lot of sex with them. And they spend weeks with her. And she gets the men so exhausted that then when they finally manage to get out of the woods, they're too exhausted to spend time with their wives.
Oh.
And what I also was writing about in this book, what really inspired me is that earlier in the centuries, especially in the 1600s and early 1700s, people believed that these creatures were actual creatures that existed for real, and it was not a belief. It was taken as fact. They existed,
Sure.
and spending time with them was illegal. And if somebody was accused of being spending time with them, they were taken to trial and often executed in what we call the
Wow.
sorcery trials. It's fascinating.
So if a man didn't want to sleep with his wife, she could just accuse him of going and
You
wow.
know, yeah, and I'm glad you said that actually, because that may be how some of these stories came up. How, yeah, he must have been Reo who's tired him out. And yeah, that's very likely, actually. So thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. So how would like someone be suspected of being with like Nacken? Nacken?
Yeah, Necken, right.
Necken, sorry.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Often people thought they had seen him because that he's been around because people had drowned. Other
Okay.
times, people were accused of having spent time with him for other reasons. And there's a very interesting case from the 1650s, and I will be a little vague in case your listeners wants to read the book. But there was a woman who was 97 years old who was taken first to the local tribunal and tried because she was accused of having put the disease on her sister and sister-in-law and her sister-in-law's friend and a cow. And they asked her a lot of questions. Then they were pushing her, and finally she admitted that she had learned about herbs from Nicken 50 years earlier.
Hmm.
And she was taken to the Supreme Court in Sweden and tried. And one of the reasons that they said that proved her guilt was that they found a rune stick in her house. And that was then clearly, according to them, proof that she had in fact been with Necken. And also she was an old, ugly woman, which was also proof of her guilt. So it was fascinating. And there were several cases like that in the 1650s and early 1700s. And then in the mid 1700s, it's changed a little. People's views on Necken and Rå, or sometimes she's called the forest Rå, changed a little bit. So also the courts and the questioning changed a little bit, but it was fascinating.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Swedish sorcery trials.
Yeah.
I will say that I got sort of close to Necken in pronunciation, considering I'm not even going to try to pronounce the
No,
other
you
one.
no need.
You said it a bunch of times, but considering the way it is spelled, there is no way I would have ever imagined that that would be the pronunciation.
No, really. Let me see if I can, if you think of, my husband keeps telling me that it's a little like row your boat, but
Hmm.
it's not really. It's more like a raw egg. So in between row and raw, rå. And then with my southern Swedish R is rå, but it's hard to pronounce. However you want to pronounce it is fine.
Rewa. Is that close?
That
Rewa?
sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
that sounds good.
I'll never remember it. I'll have to listen back to this when I'm.
Yeah, yeah, and call her whatever
Yeah.
the way you imagine it sounds. That's totally fine too.
Okay, so let's talk a little more about the story. So you said it's from the perspective of those two characters. So
Yeah.
it's all right. So are they in first person when they're talking about the story? What I imagine, because both of those sound like pretty dark characters to me,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You know, they're drowning people and, wearing people out with their antics.
Hmm.
But surely they don't see themselves as dark characters.
Right. Yeah. That's thank you for asking that. And that's it was very interesting to write these characters because they are very complicated. So I write in third person, but I'm inside the characters' heads. So Necken, the guy, the male water creature,
Mhm.
and I should say they both my characters pretend to be human, so they
Okay.
live among people, but they're not, and they both know they're not. And Necken is very, very conflicted. He gets drawn to water, and he can't resist it. It's some of my readers have said it's almost like he's an alcoholic. There's nothing he can do. He gets drawn into the water, and his music moves him, and he plays his music, and then women get in the water with him, and he can't stop. And then he realizes he's drowned them, and then he feels horrible and guilty. And he grew up with a Catholic family. Sweden was Catholic up until the end of the 1500s. So he also had religious guilt, which made it very interesting to write. And he tries to stop. He prays to God, and he can't stop. So, but I feel close to him as a character. He's a genuinely loving man and kind when he is not too close to water. When he's with water, in the water, it's all over. There's nothing he can do about it. But he's a kind person otherwise, and he tries his best. But yes, he has a very, very dark side because he does kill people.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, my favorite characters in folklore are ambiguous characters. Like they might help you, they might hurt you. I like the trickster gods because I feel like those are more relatable kinds of characters
Hmm.
because it's like, don't we all feel that way? Like we want to be a good person. Sometimes we do not great things,
Hmm.
and then we feel terrible about that. And
Yeah.
so those kinds of creatures or characters are to me the best ones out there because it speaks to how we try and be, and
Yeah.
it's like many folk tales go, they might be a warning, or they might be a morality tale. And
Hmm.
so stories like that I feel like are more realistic to who we are as people.
Yes.
Then, you're either like the princess is helpless, or, the hero is good, and there's no ambiguity, no choice. And so I love that that character is not just like gleefully drowning people.
Hmm. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. It was certainly more interesting to write, and it was a good way to get the story in there from all the stories I have researched and learned about. So it was great. And I myself also liked reading about characters like that because they are more relatable when they're not perfect. And Reo, my female forest character, she is more like a strong female character. She didn't feel guilty. She was very secure in her sexuality. She lived in Sweden when there were a lot of religion and religious rules about sexuality and women, but the 17th century is actually not that strict in a certain way. So, but she was very old, and is very old in my book. There are stories, historical tellings of her from the time of the Vikings, Norse stories
Oh,
about her. So, in the story, I made her really old. So she thought a lot about her time when she lived with her Norse. The Norse is the Norse religion. Her family who practiced Norse religion, and Vikings. They're more known as the Vikings, and so she thought about that, and she didn't like in the book, she doesn't like the Christian religion, so she stands a little bit outside of that. She has her own memories and her own attachments to Thor and Freya and the Norse gods. And she feels very confident, and she knows who Necken is, so she has a lot of opinions on him. So that was also very interesting to write.
yeah. I think that it's really so fascinating that this overtly sexual person or creature,
Hmm.
that you made her quite old, because we are so often, we act like older people just are non-sexual.
Yeah.
And, I don't think that's the case at all. And I think that it's interesting that, these men are compelled, right? And it does, I think it speaks to a certain fear that men are not going to be in control in a sexual situation.
Hmm.
And that, again, oh my God, like just the idea that it's like, oh, this creature is, sexual, and so she's horrible and she wears the men out. It's like, this is like the original slut shaming,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's terrible. I couldn't help myself because she compelled me and she's the evil one, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, okay. That just sounds like a bunch of BS
Hmm.
from, guys who are out having a little something, something on the side,
Yeah.
and they want to, justify it. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, the siren song and all of that kind of thing. And it's just, oh my God, it's always been that way, right?
Yeah. Always been like that. And you can see how the lore comes from that. Oh,
Right.
she is this sexy woman and she lures them away. It's the woman's fault.
Right.
So it was interesting to write her as somebody who's like, I want to do this. And there's also the shaming in women having sexual feelings as well. And it's like, I am confident. I don't feel that this is a bad thing to do. And it was nice to write that into her character. And yeah, of all the books I've written, I think this is the one the research that I did before was the most fascinating, actually. And also the sorcery trials in Sweden during this time, it was people truly, it's not a belief, like I said before, this was just the way it was. And scientists were debating how did God create these creatures? Because they existed. Wasn't a question. They thought they existed. And everyone was religious. So if they existed, God allowed them to be there. And
Right.
yeah, so that was,
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me. Now, the trials are the sorcery trials different than the trials that you would go through if you had consorted with one of these creatures, or is that the same thing?
I would compare them mostly to witch trials. Only witch trials, then women and sometimes men also, but most often women were accused of being witches. In
Right.
these cases, they were accused of having been involved with these two characters, these two mythological characters. And the Swedish word for it is better than sorcery trials. It's actually trolldomsrättegångar, which means trolldom trials. Troll, as in the mythological trolls, and not the modern view of trolls. So
That's
trolldom
that's great.
trials, which is interesting because it was, yeah,
I love that.
sorcery or
So, are there other creatures besides these two that people would get sent to trial for consorting with?
yes, but not as many that I have found. And I also should pre-qualify that by saying I have only done research for these two particular creatures in the trials, but there are several of the female versions. There's a mountain Reo, like Reo, my character. She's the forest Reo. Then there's a mountain Reo, and then there's a sea Reo as well. And so yeah, there's been there's lore about those two characters as well. And the Näcken is the only male one in the water in Sweden as I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I don't know if you know the answer to this because, as you said, you didn't research the others,
Yeah.
but with the sea and the mountain, is it the same kind of thing where they get sucked in like they do to the tree?
Yes, especially the mountain Reo. There's actually a little bit of a mixing. One of the trials that I write about in the book is another woman who was. This is another interesting case. They said she had several children with Näcken. And
Oh,
then she, in the trial, in the court case that I read, it said that she was also in the mountain with another man and with Näcken. And the other man who was in the mountain with her said that he had seen the mountain Reo. So it's a little, those two stories and the lore in that was kind of a little bit mixed into both of Mountain Reo and the Forest Reo and Näcken, which was very interesting. And that was unusual.
yeah. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, come on. Like what happened was those two went, they met up in the woods,
Yeah,
they had sex, and then he's got his story about I'm not going to be able to say it, about
yeah,
the,
that's it.
yeah,
Reo, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And then she's got, a similar story, and yet she's the one accused, right?
hmm Yeah, yeah, but not always. There were many men also who were accused of spending time with the forest Reo and with Näcken as well. And that's another really interesting story. There was a man, also 97 years old, when he was accused. And he was accused of having met Näcken and written, and he had written a book of black magic with Näcken. And that's another story that I get very involved with, or I have a lot of storyline from that court case in the book. And he also knew the skogsrå, the forest rå. And men were also taken to trial and executed for having spent time with the forest sprite, forest rå. The forest sprite might be a
Maybe
easier
I'll
thing
try
for you
that.
to pronounce, actually, if you want to
Yes,
call it.
that'll be much easier.
Yeah,
So I'm wondering, hearing about this man who was accused of consorting with the Necken,
yeah,
because and others obviously were too, right?
yeah,
And so I wonder to myself, and don't expect you to have the answer to this, it's just coming up for
yeah,
me,
yeah, yeah.
is what the views of homosexuality were at the time and different LGBTQ. How did people deal with that? Because I know there have been times in history that are much more conservative, but then there are times where people are like,
Yeah,
and they don't
yeah,
care as much. And there are cultures in which they don't
yeah,
care.
yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that too, because that's very interesting. In the time I'm writing about here, it was not really spoken about much. People did not care so much. And the reason for this was that people were nervous about strange offspring. People thought
Mm-hmm.
that people could have, you could, there were beings that were half human and half creature. And people were very nervous that people could, if there was bestiality happening, if a man had sex with a cow, the cow could have a human animal child. And that was terrible and a horrible thing. And they were very, very nervous about these things happening. So that was the focus. Homosexuality was not really talked about. Later in Swedish history and my other book, which I will talk a little bit about, because it's about the Foremother's Café, then it was illegal in Sweden also to have a homosexual or gay relationship was not legal. And then later in Sweden, we became one of the first countries where it became legal to get married and all of that.
Oh,
So yeah.
interesting.
But in Näcken and Rau's time in my book, it was not spoken of much.
Okay.
And I can say that in my story, Näcken, he's bisexual, and
Okay.
that's just part of him, and it's not really something that he thinks much about or other people talk about really in there. It was just how he was. And again, the history at that time didn't talk much about that. There were other things they were more conservative about.
Yeah, I love fiction that just includes,
Thank you.
yeah, characters that are different and
Yeah,
they're not there to like be gay or be
right.
bisexual. It's just part of who they are. It comes up and you're aware of it, and then it's not central to the storyline.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, though that
Thank you.
to me is great and a long way toward people being starting to be more accepting, right?
Hmm.
Because if you just say, "Hey, being bisexual is a normal part of life. You
Yeah,
probably know bisexual people."
of course. Yeah, exactly.
I think that that's great. And I will say, as far as the bestiality fears,
Hmm.
I mean, I think we should all be kind of upset if someone is out there having sex
Oh
with,
yeah,
you know,
because it is extremely unethical and it's animal
right,
cruelty. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, of course. But I'm just talking about what people in that time who were conservative, their focus was that because
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
scared of that happening. And one thing that I researched during this time is they thought if a man died in the water, his sperm could float out and impregnate fish. And that's why they sometimes found fish that looked odd. And, there could be a deformity in the fish, but that's how they
Wow.
explained it. So that's where that comes from. It's not to compare anything about bestiality or gay relationships. It was just the historical context at that time and what people focused on. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned your other book that is connected to the Foremothers Cafe. So let's talk about the book a little bit.
Sure. So Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool is the book about Swedish women in southern Sweden, near the town where I grew up, and who fought for the right to vote and reproductive justice, which came a little later. So my book begins in 1889. And at that time, women hadn't really started talking about voting rights yet. There was some talk, but they talked more about temperance. And the temperance movement was really getting traction. And in case your readers don't know about the temperance movement, it was the movement to drink less alcohol And women especially became involved, got involved with the temperance movement because they wanted their men to drink less. Because if their husbands drank less, they had more control in their marriages. They would have more household money and they would be able to space their pregnancies because they could tell their husbands that they needed to wait with sex.
Well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. One of my games that I designed is about finding a speakeasy.
Ah,
And one of the images that I use in it is this, group of very grim looking women. And the sign that they have is, I think it's lips that touch liquor shall never touch mine. And it was, obviously part of the temperance movement here.
yeah, yeah.
It's so funny because every image that I've seen of either, women in the temperance movement or also women trying to get the vote is the
Hmm.
women are all like grim looking and unattractive. A beautiful, compliant woman would never want those things, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
oh my goodness.
yeah. Very true.
So let's talk about the Foremother's Café and why you created it, what it is, and how people participate in it.
Yeah, sure. So, in Sour Milk and Sheep's Wool, one of my characters, I have two main characters, and one of them is Hannah, and she has a cafe in the book, cafe and bakery, and that's where she meets her local women, her friends, and other local women in her town who also fight for temperance and then advocate for the rights of women and equity. And then later in the book, they start to focus more on suffrage and the right to vote. And it becomes a community of sorts. And, the women, they know each other for years. They start meeting there in maybe 1890, and women finally win the right to vote in Sweden in 1919. So they've known each other for a long time and they meet there, and it becomes a very close-knit community. And that really inspired me. So I created the Foremothers Cafe, which is a replica of the cafe in virtual reality. And at first, I just created it to have a way for my readers to go inside my book. But just like it did in Hannah's Cafe in the book, it's taken a life of its own, and it's now really a cultural center, an international cultural center, and a women's history museum in virtual reality. And it's amazing. It's really changed my life, actually. It's
Yeah, and I'm kicking myself because I forgot yesterday to go
oh, it's okay.
to
Next week.
the Thursday. There's a Thursday coffee meeting at
Yeah,
what is it
1
at
p.m.
1 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, 1 p.m. Eastern,
hmm
exactly.
Yeah, and so the one time that I went, I had some technical trouble,
Hmm.
which I haven't quite figured out yet. So I'm gonna go dive back in there between like now and the next meeting. But it was really interesting. And at first it was, everybody was kind of sitting around a table having coffee virtually. And
Hmm.
and then didn't you brought in what was it the creature that you brought in?
Oh yeah, we had a dragon there. We
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
started to get restless, so we brought out notes. You can bring notes out and just hang them in the air or put them on the tables there, and each person can write a note. And then there was a dragon. They're called IFX. They're like 3D models that is in the Engage library. The Foremothers Cafe is on the Engage platform. And there's a library so you can pull out things and they move. So this dragon that I pulled out, I put it on one of the chairs and it flies and it moves, it flops its wings. So the time you were there, we were all a little in a playful mood. Sometimes we just sit and talk. Sometimes we're having, intimate conversations and share. Sometimes we're just talking about the weather. It's very casual. And that time you were there, we were in the mood and testing things
Well,
out in there.
when I was trying to figure it out too, I was trying to figure out how to walk around, and I was
Yeah,
like, just, let me sort of figure out what I'm doing in here. And
yeah.
I think I had to ask you guys how to sit down. And
Right, right, right. Yeah. And it depends if you're in a headset, you sit down in a certain way. If you're on a PC, in a different way, or Mac, same on the Mac. But you just click your mouse cursor on
Right.
a chair. Put your mouse cursor on a chair if you're on a computer, and right click, and then you get seated in a chair.
Yeah, and the dragon to me, I thought that was so much fun. And it reminds me of that feature that if you go into like your Google search
Mm-hmm.
on your phone,
Mm-hmm.
it will bring up the option. It's like if I search for a tiger, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
brings up the option of turning on my camera and putting the tiger in my house, like in the room that I'm
Really?
in. Oh yeah, it's so much fun. You've
Wait,
got to
wait,
try
wait.
it.
Really?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah,
On
yeah,
your phone?
yeah.
So
And
augmented reality.
yeah,
Really?
and it's just a regular Google search, and you scroll down and the option comes up. And they're like true to size. Because I've done like a horse that would like took up my entire front
Wow.
row. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I've done tigers and lions and they roar and it's fantastic. It's I have not tried fantasy creatures though. I will have to see if I can
Ah.
do a dragon. And it's just,
Yeah.
this weird thing. And sometimes you get the perspective gets off if you're moving around and you have to like cancel it and do it again. And sometimes you don't get it quite right and it's floating a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah.
Or
It's amazing. I thank you for saying that, because we do that in our headsets. There are several ways you can be in. It's called mixed reality if you're in a headset and you bring in things into your house like that, like a tiger or But I've never done it on my phone. That's really cool.
Yeah, and so I don't have virtual reality like headsets or anything like that.
Right, right. Yeah.
I do have one that was given to me as a gift a few years back that you use with your phone, and so you
Aha.
put it on, but your phone is in there.
Oh, cardboard. Google Cardboard?
No, it was like an upgraded version of that
Yeah,
though. But
okay.
yeah, it's
Okay.
essentially the
Yeah.
same thing.
Hmm.
And I never really got that into it. So it just like first of all, I don't have time for that kind of thing. But yeah, I wonder to myself if I'm not making my experience smaller by not getting, virtual reality headset.
Yeah, I have to say, even though it is really nice to be in the Foremother's Cafe or any virtual world on your computer, you can even do it on your smartphone but the screen is so small, so I do recommend a larger screen. But if you do have the ability to get a headset, it is amazing because you're fully immersed. You're sitting there in front of people. At the Foremothers Cafe, for example, and it's like feels very real, and it's
Yeah.
amazing.
And so in the platform, I don't remember the name of the platform,
Engage.
Engage.
Yeah, yeah.
So, does it come with a bunch of templates, or are you really building things from scratch? What is it like? Obviously, the dragon is something that they have in, their library.
Yeah. Uh, well, the way it works is that if you do download Engage on your PC or Mac or in a headset, there are different worlds there. So you don't have to build anything. You can go visit any world, and there's a lot of different ones, and a lot of people who have events in Engage. And there are other virtual platforms too. And um, some people do build worlds in Engage or in other worlds. You can do that, but it's not necessary if you're just a visitor who likes it and wants to meet people you call it social VR when you go into places like the Foremothers Cafe, for example, where other people can be in the world at the same time and you can interact. And yeah, there's,
So, I've been to lectures in
hmm.
VR, which it felt very clunky to me.
Yeah.
So this experience in the Foremothers Cafe felt a lot smoother once I started to understand what to do,
Oh,
even though I
thank you.
kept freezing up. And that was, the thing I want to look at. And also, I wonder because my laptop is a hybrid, and
Okay.
so I can turn it into a tablet. So maybe I'll try it that way, and
Ah, yeah.
see because I have a touch screen, so maybe that'll be easier for me to move around that way. But it's very interesting that you created it. Now, is it? fans of the book who want to come to that world and hang out together, or is it just people who, like, when I came in, it's because I met you,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
invited me, and I was like, okay, that's great. And so I went in. I did not know that it was tied to the book at all. I was just sort of wandering around this kind of, cool little cafe,
Thank you.
and yeah, and so it
Yeah.
was it was definitely fun for me. It didn't seem like anybody was talking about the book.
No, it's very interesting. When I first created it, and I should say I did not build it. Cos and Christie XR Design built it. They did the actual technical part, and we worked together. And I usually say I created it because it's from my book, and we collaborated. I gave them all the historical details, all the Swedish details, how it looks, but I didn't do any of the building itself. Um, and they built that in what's called Unity, and then that was brought into the Engage platform. But when I first we first worked together, and I we made the cafe, I imagined it would be my readers who would find it and go in. I myself didn't realize that there's a huge VR community who just loves to be in VR and who wander in when I have events because it's displayed on the Engage bulletin board and schedule that there's an event at the Foremothers Cafe, and people show up and they go in, and it has really changed my life. Like I said before, it's taken a life of its own, and it's become this wonderful community space. And I can safely say that there's more people who find my book because they wandered into the Foremothers Cafe than vice versa. So, which is,
Yeah, and I think that because we haven't focused on folklore in a little bit, when I
yeah,
think about folklore, it's about people sharing stories and it's about people sharing space. And I've been really looking into lately, social media has gotten to the point where now it's, a bunch of strangers posting videos trying to get, views, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
originally it was social. Like
yeah,
we were
exactly.
like when I started on Facebook, I was in grad school. So I was able to start in like 2005 before it was
Hmm.
open to other people.
Yeah.
But like I didn't do much until they opened it up and people from my high school started and college
Ah,
started popping
yeah.
up. And so it was people that you knew, right?
Hmm.
And now, the algorithm is always pushing
Yeah.
reels, and I don't know anybody on TikTok. But I've got, lots of followers. I know more people on Blue Sky, I think, in real life than anywhere else. Well,
Yeah.
on Facebook, I know, real people, but
Hmm.
I'm just getting political news feeds in Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm not
I.
seeing what people are posting. And so I've been really sort of thinking about community, and I've
Hmm.
been looking into building community like you have, right?
Yeah.
Because that's people want connection. They don't
Yeah.
necessarily want doom scrolling.
No.
And like you said, you're getting together and people are talking, they're telling their stories to each other. You
Yeah.
guys are building a shared folklore in that virtual space.
Yeah. Yeah. We are.
And there were regulars that were there the time I was there, but then here's me, I'm wandering in new, and everyone was like, "Oh, hey, welcome. Here's what we do here." And of course, you were playing around with the post-its that day, so there weren't
Yeah.
like stories being told.
Yeah.
But we talked about the dragon, and it was just very much a community space. And
Thank
I
you. Yeah.
and I think that's what people are looking for. And I myself am looking to build a community space for people that want to talk about folklore and they want to
Hmm.
talk about magic in our life, basically what I'm doing with folkloring. And so I think that it's really cool that you built that out. And I still think like yes, the technical part of it you didn't do, but the idea that you had to
Hmm.
create it and
Yeah.
your vision is so I consider you the creator, you
Oh
know.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I thank you for that. I just want to make clear that I am not the technical builder behind it
Well,
because
yeah, and
yeah, but
shout out to them.
yeah,
That's
yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it is somebody came into the Foremothers Cafe who had read the book and she said, "You know what, Helen? I'm inside your brain." And I said, yeah, actually, you are inside my brain because this is how I imagined it.
it's so interesting to me because when I read a really good book, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm having a relationship with the author, which of
Mm-hmm.
course, it's a one-way relationship unless you find them on social media. I've
Yeah.
certainly, befriended authors that I loved their book
Yeah.
and that sort of thing. But that wasn't possible a while back. And, you would buy the book and then you'd read it. And afterwards, you'd be like, how is everyone living their normal lives? I'm devastated that I
Yeah.
don't have this world anymore. I can't ever
Oh,
experience that for the first time again.
it's so true. You have to reread the book.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting, and I know that we build these relationships because when you see like an author fall from grace, they say something horrible or it comes to light that they've been molesting people or whatever.
Yeah.
And people take that really personally.
Yeah.
And I mean, I suppose it's the same for anyone famous,
Mm-hmm.
but it's with writers, man, people are upset when that happens because they're like, now I can never read this again. And now this is tainted for me.
Yeah.
And so much debate over like Harry Potter, right?
That's right. There is. Yeah,
And
she's one of the authors that people feel differently about now because of that. And
right.
her work was so imaginative.
Well, it was so beloved, really.
Yeah.
And, I think that there are a lot of people who were maybe LGBTQ and they clung to those stories because they could see themselves in there. And then
Hmm.
to find out what her views are, they
Yeah.
were betrayed, you
Yep.
know? And
Exactly.
and there's another author that I won't name that was a big feminist.
Hmm.
And he then ended up being a horrible person and being very manipulative. And
Oh,
again,
really?
people were outraged. They were like, never again. Don't even ever want to mention his name again.
Right.
And
Right.
so like I think that that's really when you build a community like that
Hmm.
and someone one of your readers can come in and talk to you, it's amazing, right?
Oh,
Like
thank you.
yeah, so cool. So and I think,
Thank you.
we'll find more and more that community is becoming more and more important. And it's great. Like you're on the East Coast, I'm in Chicago, and here we are talking, right?
Yeah,
The first time that I ever spoke to you was in virtual reality.
that's right. Yeah. I'm so glad you did that. And I'm so glad you're thinking of the community because it's especially when you're in a headset, you are fully present. But you can lift up your headset and you can look and check your phone like this, or you can't see now because it's a podcast. But if you picture me lifting up my headset and looking at my phone, you can do that.
Yeah.
But it's easier not to. And you're sitting there talking to people, and everyone is as present. No one has their phone there like you do in your physical life now. You go somewhere and somebody gets a text message, and then you Google something, and it's like we're fully present and we're sitting there talking with each other, and it's beautiful. And the what I call fake guys. It's a Swedish word. It means coffee break with friends and something sweet to eat. And that's what we do on Thursdays. And we've been doing it for 2 years now. And usually the same group of people who come every Thursday. And we feel very close to each other because we've gotten to know each other. And yeah, it's lovely. And it's wonderful for me too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
really
I'm
beautiful.
sure it's great to connect. And for me, I work from home.
Yeah.
So I have a community of friends in Discord, and
Hmm.
I go to a community of someone else that I interviewed, and he does something called the seasonal movement about how you live differently throughout the year to
I listened
match.
to that episode. It's fantastic.
Yeah, he's got on Tuesdays at, well, 3 for Chicago time.
Yeah, okay.
It's just like coffee and hang out.
Ah,
And we get on and we're on camera. It's not a
hmm.
virtual space or anything. And so I do that and that's like a nice community. So yeah, I think that people need that.
Yeah,
So,
we do
okay,
for
let's
sure.
talk about how people can find you, find your work, where they should go if they want to go to the Foremothers Cafe.
Sure, sure. So if we start with the Foremothers Cafe, my website is theforemotherscafe.com. And if you think forefathers, it's foremothers instead. The foremotherscafe.com. That's about the Foremothers Cafe, and there's an FAQ there with instructions on how to join and how to download the Engage platform and how to move around. And there's a lot of information there and more about our events at the Foremothers Cafe and things like that. And then my author page, my author website is helenirwin.com. And that's HelenErwin.com, helenirwin.com.
And I will put the links in the show notes so anybody
Oh,
can
great.
find those easily and they don't have to
Yeah.
remember that and type it out.
Okay.
Okay, so do you
Thank you.
have any final thoughts for listeners about folklore, about any virtual reality, about anything else?
Sure. Well, for folklore, I really encourage you to do what I did, and that is to look at your own history. And if you have parents that are still alive, if you have grandparents that are still alive, if you ask them about stories in their lives and what they learned when they grew up, and then look at the history from your country or your culture surrounding the folklore stories you have heard, because I was very surprised. I didn't know about the court cases surrounding Necken and Reo. In more modern times, they are seen more like magical, mysterious creatures. And most people in Sweden today, they're not aware of the gruesome history. And it was very interesting to learn that. And you also kind of get a sense of where things are coming from and why people believe the way they did. And I learned a lot. So I would encourage everyone to do that. Look at your own history from your own culture and seek out the Foremothers Cafe and come and join us because it's really a beautiful community, just like Tracy said here. It's nice and please come and join us. It's easier than you think. And you don't need a VR headset to join.
Yes,
You can do it
yes,
on your PC or Mac.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time today. This was fascinating. I'm glad that I learned a whole bunch of folklore that I didn't really know about. So I really appreciate you being here and taking the time.
Thank you. It was wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
As always, thank you for listening to Folkloring. If you have any questions or comments or would like to suggest a topic for a future episode, please email us at folkloringpod@gmail.com or message us on Blue Sky, Facebook, or Instagram. Other places you can find me are at the Folklore Podcast as the theater, film, and storytellers correspondent or creating folklore-inspired games at madmenandheroes.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and keep the traditions alive. And I hope that wherever you are, folklore is making your life more magical.